Hello.
Right.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Duran.
Hi. Okay, so I'm here.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you can see me.
Let's see how many people are on the.
I can see just three of us, the host and me and you.
Mm-hmm. And so this is live stream on YouTube.
Yes.
So people will be see from the Mmca TV, the YouTube channel.
Mm,
There we have, how many people do we have already? There we have
right.
11 people watching. But I mean, it will increase.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe I can see if I can open up on a different monitor. There you go, live now. I can see that MMCA, it's already here. Oh, I'm already appearing.
Hi.
Ilmaz, hi Ilmaz. Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
Hello, Ilman.
Hi.
Good to see you. Okay, maybe I have to get this. Strange. You know, like I'm doing this on my iPad and then somehow I don't think I can see all the screens.
아, 그렇게 도련쌤 여기 보이는데? 여기 도련쌤 보이는데?
지금 다시 또 안 보이게 해놨어요.
Okay.
Am I appearing and disappearing?
Oh, now it's disappeared. 보이면은, 그걸 더블 클릭을 하면은 그걸 고정할 수 있을 거예요.
Okay.
그렇긴 한데.
Yeah, it's hard. I can't really tell what am I supposed to look at.
You can just look at the Zoom meeting because it's live stream.
Yeah, and just something about the web version, the browser version, doesn't quite work. Anyway, I mean, you can see me clearly, so that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it is already live streaming now.
Is this true? Is it live streaming?
Yeah, because I actually have the YouTube your YouTube page open, and
so
I can
talk about some secrets.
Yes.
But maybe you could
You perhaps mute your. 근데 우리가 먼저 얘기는 해야 되나?
maybe you could say something a bit how we will, you know, about the how it will go.
So we will. Firstly, I will introduce about the event, and then we will play the 2 videos that we already shot with the subtitles on it, and then it's going to be of conversation. I will have some questions for you guys so we can speak, and then afterwards we will get some questions from the comments from the audience. And Ilmaz, you said you have to leave at certain hours, aren't you?
Actually, I'm a bit more flexible now.
That's great.
Because we also we did already the press conference digital. I mean, we recorded everything, and this will go on. Will be sent to the journalists then actually.
Oh, that's fantastic! Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
선생님이 뮤트하면 되는 거야? 근데 왜 이미지가 안 가지?
I don't hear you. Did you all switch off your?
Oh, no, I just muted myself. Okay, no, I was just saying that I'm looking at one screen for the interaction, and on another monitor I have the YouTube page open, and there seems to be a bit of a time lag. So maybe that's what they're trying to figure out.
For YouTube, it really depending on the receiver's perspective. So if their internet is slower, then it just starts. So eventually you'll get like several minutes delay at the end.
I see. Okay, got it.
So you don't need to worry about that. We just focus on the Zoom for us.
Okay, that's good.
So that will be a translation. So I'll be speaking in Korean mainly because majority of audience will be Korean. So here we have Taeyong, our translator. He's also a curator and writer. So for this time, he will be translating us our conversation. So both Korean and English. I will briefly introduce you guys, very briefly, because Ilma introduced yourself in the video. So I'll just kind of very brief in the intro, and then we'll jump in directly to the video. So as you watch again what you have discussed, maybe there's more things that come to your mind to talk about for the 20 minutes or so. And then for other 20 minutes, we will receive the questions from the audience. So for that one, I will look at the YouTube comment. Okay, 2 minutes left. 그러면은 2분 있다가는 선생님이 우리 넷은 다 언뮤트 해주실 거죠?
네, 할 거예요.
네.
그러니까 지금 언뮤트 돼 있어요.
얘기하는 거 같은데.
다 듣고, 응.
아, 그래?
어차피 화면 스크린이.
저희 4시부터 행사해가지고.
네네. 지금 제가 아까 전화드렸는데 저희 그 비아피분이랑 송수영님이랑 지금 양해도 관람하시겠다고 오셨다는데 혹시 제가 이진 큐레이터님 전화드렸는데
제가 지금
네네.
행사 중이어서 6시에 끝날 것 같아요.
혹시 다른 분 담당자님 전화를 혹시 제가 하나 받아도 될까요? 바쁘신
저희
것
둘밖에 없어요.
그러면 혹시 어디로 얘기를 드리면 될지.
밖에 없는.
다른 캐릭터 쓰면 되게 말씀드리겠죠.
어떤 분이세요?
저희 부사장님.
Unmute. Okay, so maybe this is better. Wait a second. Sorry, I know that I'm appearing twice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just doing a kind of a funny thing where I'm using one computer for the video and another for audio so that I can see everybody, because my iPad doesn't show everybody. So now I'm only using iPad for the audio. So I hope that works.
Okay, so now it's 4 p.m. so we can officially start, I think.
Okay.
1 second. 안녕하세요.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
지금 몇 분 계실까요? 여기 몇 분 정도 계시죠? 27분 보고 계시네요. 안녕하세요. MMC의 현대차 시리즈 2020 양의규의 O2 and H2O 전시 연계 대담 공기와 물, 용어 범주 행사에 오신 여러분 환영합니다.
Welcome to this afternoon's event titled Air and Water Lexicons and Categories for the 2020 MMCA Hyundai Motor Series, 해규양 O2 and H2O.
저는 이번 전시를 기획한 국립현대미술관 이지회 학예연구사입니다.
I'm Jihae Lee, the curator of the MMCA who have curated this exhibition.
오늘 행사는 이렇게 유튜브 라이브로 중계가 되고 있고요. 대담 중에 궁금하신 사항은 댓글로 남겨주시면 질의응답 시간에 선별해서 답변 드리도록 하겠습니다.
As you can see, the event is live streamed through our YouTube channel. If you have any questions and comments, you can simply leave your comments on the YouTube chat room so that we can respond.
Okay. 그리고 네, MMC의 현대차 시리즈는 현대자동차의 후원으로 매해 한국 중견 작가의 개인전을 커미션하는 연례 전시입니다. 올해의 주인공 양희규 작가는 O2N H2라는 제목의 전시를 선보였는데요. 어제 배우 정우성님의 나레이션으로 전시 소개 영상이 이 유튜브 MMC의 채널에 소개되었습니다. 혹시 아직 확인은 못하셨다면 이 대담 이후에 찾아보시면 좋겠습니다.
MMCA Hyundai Motor Series is sponsored by Hyundai Motor Company. It's an annual program of the museum to support the mid-career Korean artists to have a large-scale solo exhibition. Actually, yesterday we have uploaded a special exhibition tour narrated by a famous Korean actor Jung Woo-sung. So if you have any chance, please check it out later.
이번 전시와 더불어서 다양한 연계 프로그램이 계획되어 있습니다. 그중 전시 기간의 시작과 끝에 가로호처럼 2개의 라이브 대담 시리즈를 마련했는데요. 이 두 행사는 특별히 주한 독일문화원의 협력과 지원으로 진행되고 있습니다.
There are many public programs for this exhibition, and especially there are 2 special events like a parenthesis that's encompassing the exhibition. And these 2 exhibitions are realized by the generous support from the Goethe Institute in Korea.
그 첫 시간인 오늘 대담의 주제, 공기와 물, 용어와 범주는 이번 전시와 함께 야심차게 준비한 저희 공기와 물, 양혜규에 관한 글모음 책에서 따왔습니다. 2001년부터 올해까지 20년 동안 양혜규 작가의 작품 활동의 중요한 시점에 쓰여진 다양한 필자들의 36편의 글을 모은 아주 의미 있는 책인데요. 이 책의 중요한 필자 2분을 오늘 모시고 좀 더 심도 있는 말씀 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
So today's event, live conversation number 1, air and water lexicons and categories, is it's been inspired by our catalog for the exhibition, which has a similar title with today's event. This book includes 36 essays on Haegyu Yang, which range from 2001 and almost for 20 years. So today we have 2 of the very important authors who have contributed to this catalog.
먼저 홍콩 M+의 부관장님이시자 수석 큐레이터인 정도령 선생님 모셨습니다.
So first we have Doryun Chung, who is currently the deputy director and also a chief curator at the M+ in Hong Kong.
정도령 선생님은 2003년부터 미니애폴리스 워크아트 센터의 큐레이터, 그리고 2009년 이후 M+에 오시기 전까지 뉴욕 모마의 회화 조각부 부큐레이터를 역임하기도 했습니다. 양혜규 작가와의 오랜 인연으로 지금까지 총 3편의 양혜규 사전을 기고했고 이 3편 모두를 이번 선집에 실었습니다.
Doryun Chung has been working as the curator at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, USA. And also before moving to the M+ in Hong Kong, Doryun was also served as the associate curator at the Department of Sculpture and Painting at MoMA in New York. So far, he has written 3 dictionaries for Haegyu Yang, and all of these 3 dictionaries are included in our catalog.
The anthology.
Yeah.
네. 다음은 켈렌 루드비히 미술관의 일마즈 지디오르 관장님이신데요. 2001년 함부르크 쿤스트베어라인의 관장님이셨고 또 2009년부터 2015년까지 브레겐스 미술관의 관장님을 역임하셨습니다.
And we also have today director Ilma Sibio, who served as the director of the Hamburg Kunstverein since 2001, and between 2009 and 2015, Ilma served as the director of the Kunsthalle in Bregenz in Germany.
네. 양혜교 작가가 유럽 현대미술계의 중요한 작가로 자리매김 하는데 결정적인 역할을 한 대규모 전시를 기획한 큐레이터이고 특히 2018년 개최된 루드비히 미술관 전시와 함께 출간된 그 카탈로그 레전에 실린 작가와의 인터뷰가 이번 공기와 물 선집에 소개되기도 했습니다.
So Ilmas has been a key curator who has helped Haegyu become a major artist in Europe. He has curated major exhibitions of the artist, and especially he has written an essay for Haegyu's 2018 exhibition, which we also have in our anthology for the exhibition.
네. 두 분 모두 2000년대 중반부터 양혜교 작가의 성장 과정에 긴밀하게 결부된 인물이라 할 수 있는데요. 그만큼 이번 선집을 통해서 전달하고자 하는 역사성과 또 이러한 역사성이 전시 O2앤 H2와 어떻게 새로운 국면으로 공명하는지 함께 생각을 나누는데 더없이 알맞은 분이라 여겨서 이렇게 온라인으로나마 모시는 자리를 마련했습니다. 바쁜 일정 중에도 시간을 내주신 두 분 정말 감사합니다.
So Dorian Chong and Ilma Sibyol, the two people are very, very important people for Haegyu Yang's artistic career. I mean, for the development of the artistic career. And we would like also to investigate today the historicity that we want to deliver through the anthology, and also how these concepts are reverberates with this exhibition O2 and H2O. So although we cannot have them offline, we have invited them via online means. So thank you both of you for sharing time with us today.
Okay. 그러면 이제 시간 절약을 위해서 두 분의 발제 영상을 저희가 사전에 촬영하고 자막을 달았습니다. 한 분당 약 20분가량의 발제를 듣고 나서 대담의 시간을 갖고 또 이후에 질의응답을 하도록 하겠습니다.
So for the sake of saving time, we have subtitled their lectures, talks. So these will continue for each 20 minutes. So we will have conversations and Q&A session after we see the video.
Okay. 그럼 먼저 정도란 선생님의 발제 영상을 보겠습니다. 보시겠습니다.
We'll start with Doran's video first.
Many thanks to Haegyu Yang and Ji-Hui Lee for conceiving this very interesting program and inviting me to be part of it. I'm delighted to be on the program also with Ilmas, who's a curator and museum director that I have great admiration for. And also he's been an esteemed colleague for many, many years. So really delighted. So due to the ongoing pandemic travel restrictions, I obviously have not been able to see the recently opened Mmca exhibition of Haegyu Yang's work, but I have been enjoying virtual views and tours of the exhibition, and I'm looking forward to receiving also the physical copy of the anthology of critical writings on Haegyu's practice that I have contributed to. The international shipping of books has become ever more important during this time, especially, so that we can stay connected to the outside world and a world of words and ideas. So I will launch writing to start from the beginning. The first time I had the pleasure of working with Haegyu Yang was around 2006, 2007, when I, along with my co-curator at the time, Yasmil Raymond, invited Haegyu to take part in a group exhibition titled Brave New World at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. So here you see Haegyu's contribution, which is a work titled A Series of Vulnerable Arrangements, Blind Room. It was originally created for the Sao Paulo Biennial, but the work was not preserved. So for this exhibition, we recreated the installation. Later in the year, Haegyu opened this exhibition, which I think was the first American solo presentation of Haegyu's work at Red Cat, titled Asymmetric Equality. So again, Red Cat in Los Angeles in 2007. And I was invited to contribute to the first American catalog and monograph. But I'm showing you this image because this is an important reference to what I ended up deciding to write. So here's another exhibition at the Walker Art Center where I worked from 2003 to 2009. And I worked on this exhibition called House of Oracles of Kwon Yung-ping Retrospective, which was organized by the main curator, Philippe Van, now director of Serrabes Museum in Portugal. And I was assisting him to put together this first retrospective of Kwon Yung-ping's work and co-edited this manuscript. And in this book, one of my contributions was to write this piece called Kwon Yung-ping Lexicon. So as you can see here, it takes the form of a dictionary. I hope you can see. It starts alphabetically with alchemy, followed by avant-garde. And I felt that this form of lexicon or dictionary is one effective way of elucidating or unpacking crucial references and sources of inspiration for Kwon Yung-ping. Sources and references that are drawn from the history of modern art, Western modern art and philosophy, as well as ancient Chinese classics and cultural symbols. Another, I guess, source of inspiration for this piece, as well as my first dictionary for Haegyu, was Borges's story of the certain fantastical Chinese encyclopedia, which is discussed by Michel Foucault at the very beginning of the book, The Order of Things. So I think many people already know about that very famous reference. So here's my a little bit scruffy copy of the book of the Red Cat manuscript for the exhibition Asymmetric Equality. And these are my just iPhone shots from my desk. And here's what that original publication looked like, a small dictionary for Haegyu Yang. And this text, really written in 2007, published in 2008, was the result of the early process of my learning about Haegyu's practice and her intellectual journey and even intellectual obsessions. And the result, I mean, the text is also the result of simultaneously attempting to maintain an empathy as well as an objectivity. So this dictionary is divided into, or consists of rather, of 12 terms. Some of them are important historical figures that were researched by Haegyu, names such as Hannah Arendt, Marguerite Duras, Petra Kelly, Kim Simon Lim Wells, and Chris Marker. So some of them are thinkers, or I should say perhaps all of them are thinkers, but people of perhaps different professions or vocations, but all of them figures of passion and commitment. Other terms were more literary or philosophical concepts, ideas such as community and subjectivity. There were other rather quotidian terms like holiday and hometown, and also terms that are about methods of making, such as light source and origami. So all of these different terms that are coming from different classifications were all put together simply alphabetically and cross-referenced with one another as well as her works. So here are just another view of the layout and showing you some images of her first, I believe, institutional exhibition in Korea at Art Sonja Center in 2010. And for the occasion of this exhibition, there was the first Korean monograph or anthology rather of some of the writings translated for the first time into Korean. And that first dictionary was translated into Korean and published. So co-published by Hyunsil Munha and Samuso at the time. So yeah, and then we just keep going. And I think that was around the time, 2010, 2011, that the pace of Haegyu's production and productivity really ramped up significantly. And these are a couple of exhibitions that I got to see and that I believe were very, very important, marking a kind of a turning point or opening a new chapter. So one exhibition was titled Teacher of Dance in 2011 at Modern Art Oxford. In the same year, another exhibition titled Arrivals at Kunsthaus Bregenz. What I was really struck by these two exhibitions were, in addition to the new forms that are emerging, but also very strong manifestation of the ambiances, materialities, and ideas that are perhaps imperfectly described as exoticist or primitivist. And there are new personages that emerged at the time. So entering the stage, figures such as George Gurdjieff, Igor Stravinsky, and clear manifestations of her ongoing and growing interest and research into folk or pagan cultures and traditions, crisscrossing or in crossfire with references to modernist avant-garde. So this really felt like a new phase. So it was around this time that this magazine called Parquet, which came to an end a couple of years ago, but really one of the most celebrated contemporary art journals that was in existence. And the format was a few times a year that the issue would invite 3 to 4 artists, and each artist would get in-depth essays by the writers that have been identified and invited by the artists themselves. And I was really honored to be one of the writers for Yang, which resulted in the piece called Movement Studies, also included in this anthology published by Mmca in Pennsylvania for the occasion of the current exhibition. And this was also for me a kind of important marker after the first dictionary, and really trying to think again and make sense for myself of the morphing practice of Yang's work. Yeah, and then just going on to one of the next important exhibition that I also was able to see in Strasbourg, unfolding in 2 different venues of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in the city, and this historic building or space called Obet, designed by 3 very, very important artists, pioneers in abstraction, of course, Theo van Doesburg and Sophie Torbe Arp and Jean Arp, and beautifully preserved and restored. And in this space, of course, Hegyu showed, well, across the 2 venues, showed now very robust, but also more recently birthed bodies of work, blind sculptures, trustworthy collages, the bell sculptures, as well as so-called dance vehicles. So the whole, the motif and the idea of dance really began to take hold here. So it was in conjunction with that exhibition, a major exhibition, I believe that was the first, or at least the most major in France of Hegu's work. And the museum published this book. The exhibition was called Family of Equivocations. Very interesting design, quite slim and long, trim size that opens up to become a square. And here are some of the end paper spreads that are just beautifully designed of the works that are one of the works that is being modeled, and of course the close-up of the Obet building itself. So this was French only a publication, and was very happy to see that the small dictionary, now Petit Dictionnaire, translated into French and then was included. But this also became an opportunity to write the second dictionary in English, was translated as a less small dictionary for HY. And this was, of course, in response to Haegyu's as well as the museum curators, exhibition curators' invitation to update and expand on the first dictionary. And by this point, 5-6 years had already passed, and Haegyu's productivity has exploded, and also her practice was really richly deepening and expanding. So, of course, it made sense to try to write another dictionary, and I was very, very happy to have that occasion. But very soon it became very clear that the earlier, more truth-to-form dictionary-like organization of key terms arranged alphabetically somehow didn't make sense anymore. And I think it was, again, because the tentacles of these different ideas, references, and inspirations, and their relationships with that process of ideas becoming forms, and the forms themselves had become much harder to actually simply define through key terms. Thus, this second dictionary, so it became longer, which is why the title is less small. And so that I decided to, in consultation with the artist, to divide it into more chapters. And that those chapters were really seen as processual, going from material interest to physical, to methodologies, to effects. So perhaps those words are not so obvious when you think in relation to art making, but in my mind, it was really thinking about how does artist's mind works, and how does an artist's hands, what the artist's hands do. And we were trying to come up with a structure that could capture that without overly simplifying it. And under these sections were key terms such as movement, sallim, as in Korean word sallim, fabrication, handicraft, biography and abstraction, rotating and blurring, phenomena, sound, voice, and writing. So really trying to break down these sectional terms. So I already said that the title, a little bit cheeky title perhaps, because I never had the ambition to write a comprehensive dictionary or encyclopedia of all the works and ideas of Haegyu Yang's work. So the first one was a small dictionary. This I felt that still was a small, but less small, a dictionary, and with a bit of an anxiety, but in the end with I guess enough of confidence that this new structure, which it may be hard to call it a dictionary, but was in reflection of something that was developing in Haegyu's work. Before, I felt like ideas and forms and practices were very tightly woven. Around this time, it became much looser and porous, if you will. I don't think those are perfect words. I mean, I meant them in very positive ways. So perhaps the alphabetical structure didn't make sense to me anymore. So just quickly showing you the headings of those 4 sections: methodology, effects. Then, and then going forward, then her exhibition schedule became more and more ambitious. And here's, I believe, the second institutional exhibition solo show in Korea, in Lyon in 2015. And of course, a major mid-career survey at the Museum Ludwig in Cologne in 2018. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this was the first time I got to meet Ji-hui. And if I'm not mistaken, and that's when the invitation to consider writing the 3rd dictionary was made. And I don't think I accepted immediately because it's never a very easy decision. It's a major commitment, but also like I needed to get to that point where I felt enough sense of surety as well as confidence. So it took a while, but fast forward. As I was just beginning to write, of course, 2 other major shows opened at the Museum of Modern Art with its opening of the expanded facilities in October 2019. Haegyo's new commission took the literally center stage in the museum's central atrium, and another very complex exhibition at the Bass Museum of Art, Miami Beach. So new forms and new ideas further introduced to the expanding lexicon, if you will, of Haegyo Yang's practice entered just as I was beginning to write. So going forward now to the third and most recent dictionary. And so all of the texts were written in English, and some of them, the previous ones, have been translated into a couple of other languages. The first one including the Korean. Third one was also written in English, but that has never been published. So it only existed in Korean at this point. And by looking at this table of content, perhaps you kind of get a sense of the third dictionary having a similar kind of a sectionalized structure as the second one. But in fact, I think it's a further development or further mutation. In the third dictionary, there are 2 chapters, or 2 I guess chapters perhaps are the best one. The first chapter is just like the second dictionary, divided into sections, but in this case, it's a different kind of an organization. If the second one, as I said earlier, was in my mind a kind of a processual, it goes from one to the next, trying to somehow capture certain kind of process and movement in the artist's mind and hand. This one is really trying to think of almost one topography from different vantage points, perhaps. And it is a cartographic attempts. And the first one, as is written here, are about more materials, forms, and techniques. Next one is really about mapping, literally mapping geographies of different exhibitions and projects, and how Haegyo has been traversing and crisscrossing ever-expanding territories. And the third one, as all the dictionaries have been doing, are trying to map and chart and trace important ideas and personages. So some of them really entering for the first time, I think, from the field of science and theory. And then the second chapter, we called it Chrono Notes, which is portmanteau for chronology, and footnotes, really mimicking or pretending to be just like the first one, which was an alphabetical dictionary. In this case, chronologically ordered facts from prehistoric times to very, very recent. But when you read through them, then you realize that it starts from something that are truly prehistory or history, like the origin, unknown origin of the maypole dance, to the mural, 2 murals from Goguryeo Dynasty, to Shanhai Jing, the classic, the ancient Chinese classics of mountains and seas. And then as it gets closer to our date, then it becomes a chronology of the artist herself. So this gradually really revealing the deliberate, unabashed confusion of objectivity and subjectivity, if you will, which I think actually best describes this whole project in 3 parts. The project that really tries to confront the extreme difficulty or impossibility even of choosing between objectivity and subjectivity. And I think that really gets to the heart of not just this project, but of the relationship between visual language and textual language, the relationship between artists and curators or writers. Perfect alignment or understanding between these 2 things, visual language and textual language, artists and writers, that's perhaps elusive, but we at the same time need each other and exist in a symbiotic relationship. Yeah, so it's a rare thing for a curator or for a writer to have an opportunity to attempt that alignment or understanding again and again, to have that opportunity to revise and expand reiteratively what I thought I knew and what I thought I could write about. But in the end, without or with or without reservations or regrets, then I get to try again. So this has been an incredible privilege to be able to do this. But I may wait for another 5 or 6 years if there ever is a 4th edition. So thank you.
네. 지금 제가 말이 들리시나요? 그 중간에 유튜브 영상이 조금 화면하고 소리와 싱크가 안 맞는 부분이 있어서 한국어를 하시는 분들이 자막을 좀 놓치셨을 것 같아서 아마 그 영상이 들어가지 않았던 부분에 대한 말씀을 제가 조금 드리자면요. 일단은 첫 번째 사전과 두 번째 사전의 그 맥락을 조금 말씀을 하셨어요.
So apology for the video transmission issue in the middle. So I'd like to explain a little bit about the first and second dictionary that's been missed in the video.
네, 그래서 이제 첫 번째 사전 이 나왔던 또 한국어로도 번역됐었던 이 세술년 절대적인 것에 대한 열망이 생성한 멜랑콜리, 여기에 처음 이제 한국어로 번역됐고 그 전에 그 레드캣 에서 보여줬었던 전시를 위해서 만들어진 사전에 대한 말씀하셨는데 거기에 들어갔던 첫 번째 개념들을 말씀하셨어요. 그러니까 어떤 작가가 공감하면서 객관성을 유지하려고 한 노력의 결과였고 거기에는 이제 여러 가지 인물들이 등장을 하고 하나 아렌트, 마가렛 듀라스, 페트라 켈리, 김산 웨일즈, 크리스 마르커 같은 이제 인물들이 등장을 하고요. 또 공동체나 주체성이라든지 조금 더 문학적이거나 철학적인 개념들도 등장을 하고 또한 휴일이나 고향 같은 조금 더 일상적인 용어도 있고요. 또 오리가미 라는 방법론도 들어가 있었습니다.
So with the first dictionary, which has been published with Haegyu's Korean exhibition, the dictionary dealt with different people, such as Hannah Arendt or Margaret Duras or Chris Marquet, and also abstract concepts such as community and subjectivity, and also more worldly matters, as well as methodologies.
네, like folding and origami. 네, 그리고 이제 두 번째 사전에 대한 건 아마 중간부터 들으시기 시작했을 것 같은데요. 이제 두 번째 사전은 영국 모던 아트 옥스포드에서 열린 티처 오브 댄스 와 그 다음에 같은 해 쿤스트하우스 브레겐스에서 있었던 Arrivals, 그 전시 이후에 이제 조금 더 양희 작가의 작품들을 심도 있게 들여다보기 위해서 도란 선생님이 파켓이라는 잡지에 나왔던 Movement Studies를 쓰게 되면서 그 첫 번째 사전 이후에 조금 더 심도 있게 양희 작가 작품을 나눴고요.
And with the second occasion for the dictionary, it was actually after Haegyu's exhibition at Modern Art Oxford in the UK, and also the exhibition at the Kunsthaus Bregenz in Germany. Dorian Chung, as a curator and writer, had an opportunity to contribute to a magazine called Parquet, in which he contributed an article titled Movement Studies. So it has been expanded through his expanded studies.
네, 그 다음에 나왔던 게 이제 이 책 올베트라는 프랑스 스트라스부르크에서 이렇게 개최됐던 이 전시와 함께 나왔었던 도록의 그 Untitled Chapter라고 이제 번역이 됐었고 이것을 한 번 더 이제 영어로 한 번 더 그 팽창하는 less small dictionary가 이제 여기서 나오게 됐죠.
And on top of that, there was Hague's exhibition in Strasbourg at a space called Obet. So in this occasion, it was published in French under the title Untitled Dictionnaire, and it was also been translated back to English.
네, 여기서 이제 움직임이라든지 살림, 또 조작, 수공예, 자서전, 뭐 추상화 이런 것들 이런 개념들, 그 다음에 뭐 흐리게 하기, 사운드, 목소리 이런 개념들이 등장했습니다.
So in this edition, there were more concepts such as movement and 살림 in Korean, fabrication, handicraft, blurring, sound, etc.
네, 이제 여기서부터는 아마 들으셨을 것 같아요. 그러면 이렇게 이 정도현 선생님의 발제문을 듣고요. 그 다음에 이제 일마즈 선생님 발제 영상을 들으신 다음에 저희가 대화를 나눠보도록 하겠습니다.
Yeah, so I believe that from this point, the video was fine, I hope. So we'll move on to the lecture by Ilmas Zibio, and then we will have a conversation and Q&A.
My name is Ilmas Zibio.
I'm very honored and pleased that MMCA invited me to contribute with this conversation and with this talk. I'm the director of the Museum Ludwig in Cologne.
Cologne is one of the biggest museums in Germany
On 20th century art and contemporary art. We have also in our collection works by Hague Yang. Actually, we acquired them before her solo exhibition and then in the due of her solo exhibition at the Museum Ludwig when she also received the Wolfgang Hahn Prize. We acquired Mountains of Encounter, a very important piece by her. I had the pleasure to work the first time with Hague Yang in 2008. And that was actually, she was part of a group show. The group show, the title of the group show was Whose History? And the idea of the group show was to reflect the personal history, the autobiography, so to say, of an artist, and the relation of this personal history to the history of the state, the country the artist is coming from or lives in. And I invited Hague Yang because I already in 2008 thought she's a really important and super interesting artist. But I invited her also especially for this exhibition because I was aware that cultural identity and that questions of belonging that they would be crucial or that they are crucial in the work of Hague Yang. So that was the reason why I invited her in 2008 for the group show. And for this show, Hague developed at this point one of her biggest and most ambitious blinds piece with the red blinds. And it was really interesting to see how she approached this question of cultural identity, of how she connected it to the history of Korea and the history of Korea in relation to an international history and her own standing in this history. The more happy I was then that in 2018, so 10 years later, when she received the Wolfgang Hahn Prize from the Gesellschaft für Moderne Kunst at the Museum Ludwig, when we were able to acquire this piece, and this is now in the collection of the Museum Ludwig. as I mentioned before, I'm always interested in artists who have sort of like complex languages, and I think that is with Haegyu Yang certainly the case. And for me, it's always also important not only to work once with an artist, but to continually, being part of a development of an artistic language. And so actually 3 years later, in 2011, I was then the director of the Kunsthaus Bregenz in Austria at Lake Constance. It's a very incredible, beautiful building done by Peter Zumthor, the Swiss architect. It's very auratic, a very strong building with three floors. And I invited Haegyu to develop a new exhibition for this building, for this occasion of a solo show. And for me, it was important, and she agreed also to do this, not only to producing new works, and she produced very ambitious new works for this show, but also to give our audience some sort of survey. So part of the exhibition, one floor, was a very small, very condensed survey of her activities. So that was actually the first floor the people would encounter. So if people would come up the floor, they would encounter a survey of her work, from very early work, video work, and so forth. And then the next two other floors, Haegyu produced new, very ambitious works for this exhibition. And already for this exhibition, it had actually the title Arrivals, which I think is a very interesting title for an exhibition. And for me, it's actually similar to Air and Water Arrivals, because it's sort of like it announces or it deals with a moment of flux. Arrivals for me means you have a journey behind you, you come somewhere, but it also implicates that you most likely will leave the place again. So it's sort of like from one status to another, and that is for me similar to Air and Water, which is a different aggregate status in life, that you transform from one thing to the other. And I think that's also with the way of Arrivals, it has a similar meaning. And also what I like about the work of Haegyu Yang, and also how she chooses exhibition titles, or how she chooses titles for certain works, and that is maybe not so obvious. Haegyu Yang is very humorous. You may think, because a lot of her work is sort of like, if you think about the topics she's dealing with, it could be read as very heavy. And they are, in a way, they concern human mankind. They concern the relation between the different species. They ask very central questions, and very severe questions, one could say. And at the same time, and I think that's a quality of the work of Haegyu Yang, at the same time, some of her work, there can be a bit like a cheek and tongue, that you have the feeling, yeah, it is very serious, but she also is aware about the seriousness of her work, and at the same time about the impossibility of answering these like really heavy questions she asked. And so with this sort of like humorous undertone sometimes, she reflects her own approach and her own, aspiration, which is very, very high, not only for an artist, but for a human person in general. And I think with this, humorous reflection, there comes another level into her work. For example, with Arrivals, I thought it has all this meaning. You know, you could speak actually about also about a sacred arrival. You know, you could think about, you know, a deity who arrives, and that is also part of it. But at the same time, at this time, it was also related to her own career. Because when we did the show at the Kunsthaus Bregenz, I think it was her biggest show then so far. And the Kunsthaus Bregenz is an institution where very famous artists like Jeff Koons or Damien Hirst, before I came, they exhibited there, or Cindy Sherman, or Jeff Wall, Rosemarie Trockel, like a lot of very famous artists arrived, and also or did exhibition, and also artists who were much older and much more established, as Hague was at that point when she exhibited at the Kunsthaus Bregenz. So for me, Arrivals was also in a way the title a bit ironic, you know, to say, oh, I made it, no, but at the same time, yes, I made it, but I'm aware. I mean, what does it mean? You know, everything also in an artist's career somehow is sort of like relatively. And okay, I do now a show at the Kunsthaus Bregenz, and we know by now that she did a show at MoMA in New York, and like in so many big, at Centre Pompidou in Paris. So, and now at the Mmca in Seoul. So, I mean, she has like a really incredible career, and she's aware of this, but like just with the title like Arrivals, she also reflects this, you know, she's far away from being naive, and she really reflects how she positions herself in the art system and how she deals with the art system. And what I like about her strategy is that she has sort of like under control, you know, her position, how she maneuvers into the art system. And I think that's interesting. And that's also one quality of her work. So the next step then in working with Hague was then in 2008, which is 2 years ago. And if I think that the Arrivals, so the Kunsthaus Bregenz show is almost already 10 years ago. It was in 2011. So next year it will be 10 years ago. And there we published also 2011, we published the first catalog raisonné, which is I can actually show it. It's a rather small, I mean, not so small, but it's quite handy a book where we published her work from the beginning up to 2011. And actually this catalog raisonné was also for me, and I think also for Hague, the starting point for her survey. She then did at the Museum Ludwig, when she received the Wolfgang Hahn Prize, and actually we published another catalog raisonné, and this is maybe more heavy and more big, you see, and because we included all the works already in the 2011 and in the 2018. And for me, and I think also for Hague, it was interesting to have this book, the first Arrivals from 2011, to work with this and to choose the works for the survey. And the survey at the Museum Ludwig sort of like started with a piece which addressed all senses. So it was smell, it was wind, it was actually heat. And then one of the first pieces or one of the first rooms you would encounter then were the reconstruction of her early works. And I only knew about the early works because we published a catalog raisonné earlier. So I was aware of the early works, and I asked Hague that for me it would be interesting to show our audience sort of like where it all began. because I think with Hegyu, she, during her career, she developed some very impressive, very big, ambitious installation. And they also mesmerizing. You encounter this installation. They have sort of like an immersive approach. You enter it physically with your body, and all senses are activated by it. And I think sometimes these works they don't give you as much the idea where it all comes from. And what I think is interesting, it's with Hegyu, it's less, for me at least, about the overwhelming approach, about the mesmerizing. This is also there, and that's interesting. But I think for me, the most interesting thing about her work is how it all starts, and that everything, actually, also the big installations, they go back to certain thoughts, and they go back to a certain concept. And they actually vary also in the small scale she does. They can be also very sensual. And that's why it was so important for me to show the early works of hers and to show them in one room, to show these early works. And they had to be reconstructed because they were at the beginning when she was actually still studying at the Städel in Frankfurt. And so they were reconstructed, and then we showed them there for the first time. I think to reconstruct the early works, which I actually always call also, that is not official, but like between Hegyu and me, I call them the Fluxus work, because they sometimes are connected to performances, and they have also like this ephemeral character. Mm-hmm. And so Hegyu developed them actually from images also, and from her memory. And they, for me, they look very close to the things I've seen in the documentation and the photography. And actually, they also, I thought it's also somehow very generous, and also I think it's quite brave to just reconstruct them. And it also reminded me actually of Duchamp. Duchamp also later that reconstructed in the 1960s early works which got lost. And I think it's also shows how sovereign an artist can be. And I mean, Hegyu for sure is very sovereign and knows, the right decisions, I would say. And I thought it was such a right decision just to reconstruct them, to be as close to the original as possible, but then to reconstruct them. Actually, later on, Hegyu continued to exhibit them. They all belong to her collection, to her private, to her personal collection. I know that I'm sure some of the galleries, they would love to sell them, but I know that Hegyu likes to keep them from themselves, and I would strongly recommend it also to her. Because they are very important. This room, this early room for me, I always called it the brain of the exhibition. Actually, you could say it's the brain and the heart of the exhibition, because it contains so many issues of her work. For example, there were works in this early room where they were developed out of her approach to learn German. As a young Korean artist, when she came to Frankfurt, she would, try to learn German, and some way was to go to big shops and have the shop leaflets actually from construction shops, where you would buy works to make your home more beautiful, or plumbings and ropes and all different things. And with this, she would learn German and would make her early collages, for example, which she then developed later on. And so for me, these early works are very crucial to understand the way how actually Hegyu Young thinks and how she develops her works. Actually, yeah, the lacquer paintings are very important also for Hague's work for several reasons. I think one reason for me is also, for me, it's sort of like an idea also to deal with maybe also a Korean tradition, or, you know, at least the projection one has to the, like from the West to the so-called East.
Yeah, the
and this idea
lacquer.
about lacquer furniture or lacquer
furniture.
tools. But I think that is only one aspect. I think, which is also interesting, like how she positions the lacquer painting, let's say, in the tradition maybe also of Korean traditional art, but more of the idea how she positioned it in the projection the West maybe, so-called West has to the so-called East. I think that's one aspect, but the other aspect for me was also how they were produced, and that actually she also allowed chance in the production of the works, because she told me that she first produced them outdoor in the courtyard, not in her studio, because the smell was so toxic. So and then the wind actually and nature helped her to create these first lacquer paintings. And it's so poetical and beautiful to think about, you know, how a leaf would fall onto the lacquer and then stay there. And of course, with Hague, it's also there's truth in this, but of course there's also a myth and a projection. And I like this idea about how nature creates the work. And that is also something when we come back to air and water, to the exhibition at the MMCA, where it's also about nature and how nature is in a state of flux, and the relation between nature and human mankind, and how all this is intermingled. And I think that is already in the early lacquer painting, the relationship between man and nature is already in these lacquer painting included. Hague is also always very much aware about where she exhibits her artwork, and also where she, in what architectural and social and cultural context she presents them. And actually she intermingle this with the situation.
그래서 얘기하면 돼요. 네. 두 분 발제 잘 들었습니다. 중간에 테크니컬 이슈들이 있어서 좀 잡음이 있었는데요. 너그러이 양해 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
So thanks for the presentation by both of you, and I would like for you to have a generous understanding of the technical issues in the middle.
네. 그러면 이제 대담을 좀 시작을 해보려고 하는데요. 먼저 아이스 브레이킹을 위해서 제가 먼저 질문을 두 분께 한번 드려보도록 하겠습니다.
So now to the conversation. There is a prepared questions for both of you. Yes.
네. 그리고 이 대담 저희 세 대담이 끝난 후에 유튜브 창 댓글에 달린 그 질문들을 저희가 대답을 해보도록 할 테니까요. 적극적으로 질문해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
And also, please leave your comments and questions so that we will provide answers afterwards.
네. 그럼 먼저 정도련 선생님의 사전과 또 지비오르 선생님의 카탈로그 레전에 모두 큐레이터로서 또 동료로서 양해교의 작품 세계를 이해하고 또 서로 영향을 주고받는 방법론으로서 이 출판을 택한 것인데요. 이런 편집, 그러니까 에디토리얼의 과정이 어떤 측면에서 그 각자 두 분께 유용했는지 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
So for Doran's dictionary and also Ilma's catalog raisonné, these were both of these were as curators and as colleagues. It was a kind of a way for you to understand the artistic world of Yang Hae-gyu as an artist, and also it was a way to communicate with the artist. You have chosen publishing as a method. So how was this editorial process useful or even productive for both of you?
Go first. Maybe Dorian?
I mean, I would like to hear what Ilmaz would say about this, but you know, the dictionaries that I've been writing on Haegyu's work definitely needs a quotes around it, because it's really not a dictionary. It's a very subjective selections and arrangement of the keywords and ideas. Really, the main point that I was trying to make in my pre-recorded lecture is this intentional confusion between subjectivity and objectivity that is really at the heart of this ongoing writing project. I think that's actually quite different from either creating something like a catalog raisonné, which is basically all about, you know, getting all the facts right, all the data right. It's also different from, I guess this dictionary writing project is also quite different from the typical critical or curatorial writings that one does for artists.
사실은 이 부분에 대해서 일마즈 선생님 의견을 먼저 듣고 싶기는 한데요. 제가 사전이라고 할 때 이 사전 앞에 이제 인용구 같은 걸 붙여야 될 것 같습니다. 왜냐하면 이것이 우리가 일반적으로 생각하는 사전이라기보다 일종의 키워드나 개념들을 주관적으로 선택하고 배열하는 것이기 때문인데요. 저의 강연에서도 말씀드렸지만 제가 이 작업을 통해서 진행하고 싶었던 것은 객관성과 주관성의 의도적 혼동입니다. 말하자면 이를테면 카탈로그 레존의 작업 같은 것은 작가에 대한 모든 데이터와 사실을 올바르게 바로잡는 것이 중요한데요. 그것과 다르고 또 어떤 전형적인 예술 비평이나 큐레이터들의 글과도 다른 작업이기 때문이죠.
And I guess just to finish my answer to the question, because I think the question is about the usefulness of this editorial project. It's just the answer is very simple in a sense that each opportunity and the occasion has been a chance to really understand the artist's practice better, especially critical for very quickly moving and expanding and evolving practice like Haegyu's. You know, just looking at it from the point from 2007 to 2012-13 to 2019-20, there's just no sign of slowing down here. You can't also just predict that it's going to go in this direction because it's also changing directions as well. So this reiterative, the accumulative editorial process of keeping up with the evolution is just simply incredibly useful.
답변을 좀 마무리해야 될 것 같은데요. 왜냐하면 이 질문이 이 과정의 유용성에 대해서 질문해 주신 것이기 때문에 사실 답은 아주 간단합니다. 각각의 이 사전을 쓸 수 있는 기회들이 저에게는 이 양혜교 작가의 작업을 더 잘 이해할 수 있는 기회가 되었습니다. 왜냐하면 양혜교 작가처럼 작업이 지속적으로 확장하고 진화하는 작가의 작업이 이를테면 2006년, 12년에서 13년, 19년, 20년을 봤을 때 전혀 작업의 이제 전개 속도가 느려지지 않고 있었기 때문에 또한 작가의 작업이 어떤 방향으로 갈 것이다, 방향 같은 것들을 예측할 수도 없고 그 방향조차도 끊임없이 바뀌는 작가이기 때문에 이러한 축적되는 어떠한 편집 과정이 아주 유용했다고 할 수 있겠습니다.
네, 이제 정도란 선생님께서는 어쨌든 서브젝티브한 그 렉시컨으로 정리하시는 방향에 대한 이제 유용성을 말씀하셨는데, 이마전 선생님의 어떤 그런 데이터 정리하는 이제 그런 에디토리얼 편집 방식에 대해서도 좀 한 말씀 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
Yeah, so Dorian, I think, has talked about this subjective lexicon aspect of the editorial process. So maybe now it would be good to hear from Ilmas about the more organizational, factual data side of the practice.
Yep. I mean, I simply couldn't have done the retrospective without the first, or not, at least in depth, as we did then, without the first catalog raisonné we did, because actually it was through the work on the catalog raisonné that I encountered first the very early works, which were actually lost at this time and Hegyu reconstructed later. So without these basic facts, it simply wouldn't have been possible to get to know them because they were lost. I would like to come back because I think it's very interesting, and I thank you, Dorian, because always, talking to you, I have the feeling that I learn a lot and that it's very informative. And I want to pick up on what you said, the visual language in relation to the written language, because I think that is very crucial also, and even manifest in the title of the MMCA exhibition, which is called Air and Water, Lexicon and Categories. And if you think about the subtitle, Lexicon and Categories, you see already that of course Hegyu is very much aware about this dichotomy between the visual and the written or oral thing. And I think that's also something interesting maybe we could continue to talk about, because I think in Hegyu's works it manifests very beautifully and intelligently.
제 답변을 좀 드리면은, 사실은 저 같은 경우에는 첫 번째 카탈로그 레조네를 만들지 않았다면 실은 두 번째 전시를 만드는 것도 거의 불가능했을 거라고 생각합니다. 왜냐하면 이렇게 초기의 작업들을 살펴보는 것을 통해서, 특히나 이제 이런 초기의 카탈로그 레조네를 만들었기 때문에 이제 전시를 할 당시에는 이미 소실돼서 없었고 다시 만들었던 그런 작업들의 존재를 알 수 있었고요. 그리고 이제 정도련 선생님께서 말씀해주신 것들에서 정보적으로 참 많은 도움을 받았다고 말씀드리고 싶은데요. 이를테면 저희가 시각적 언어와 쓰여진 언어의 관계라는 것, MMCA 전시의 제목, 이제 공기와 물, 이제 용어와 범주라는 이 제목에서도 잘 드러나고 있듯이, 양혜교 작가는 이제 시각 언어와 언어적인 그런 언어의 차이 같은 것들을 너무나도 잘 인지하고 있고, 그것이 작가의 작업에서 너무나도 아름답게 그리고 지적인 방식으로 드러납니다.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dorian, perhaps?
I guess this is a really a very historical question that those who contemplate art, those who write about art has been saying, right? I mean, like since at least the time of the Greeks, the relationship between the visual form and language, and then their own inherent capacity as well as limitations. So obviously something that's but I didn't really approach it in consciously philosophical way. It's not a project about that relationship. I think the term is ekphrasis, right? The Greek term. That's not what motivated the project, really, to be perfectly honest. Maybe I'll just stop here for translation.
실은 지금 논의되고 있는 것이 어떻게 보면 매우 역사적인 질문이라고도 할 수 있겠습니다. 왜냐하면 시각적인 미술에 대해서 생각하는 사람, 혹은 이제 글로 쓰여진 것들에 대해서 생각하는 사람이라면 실은 이런 질문은 심지어는 그리스 시대에서부터 시각적 형식과 언어의 관계에 대해서 여러 가지 생각들이 있었는데요. 그리고 각각 시각적인 것, 언어로 쓰여진 것은 그 자체의 권능이 있다고 생각을 합니다. 하지만 솔직하게 말씀드리면 제가 이 프로젝트를 진행을 할 때 그런 철학적인 것까지 생각하면서 시작한 것은 아니었다고 하겠습니다.
But it is true that the very first motivation did come from trying to figure out the relationship between forms and ideas, also between reading and research that is on the part of the artist and what she produces as visual expressions. I clearly sense that there isn't a one-to-one relationship. It is not a referential relationship. It is not an illustrative relationship. It's a process of abstraction, but also a process of figuration as well. So I was fascinated as I was getting to know Haegyu, how she was talking about, especially at the time, the processes of learning and unlearning and also non-learning. So I thought maybe that is really what the dictionary can try to figure out, that let's really get the, try to come up with an explanation of those names and books and whatnot that she's clearly thinking about, sometimes even referencing directly. But then what happens in that kind of an alchemical process between that and then something that comes into existence in the physical world and being shown? So I don't think I came up with an answer, but I just wanted to have all of those elements just in one place so that I can continue to think about the relationship between what is more cerebral or intellectual and what is more visual and physical. And I could even say that I still haven't quite figured that out after 3 editions and 15 years.
그래서 이제 사실 이 작업을 처음에 시도했을 때 제가 생각하고 있던 것은 어떤 형식과 개념의 관계입니다. 이를테면 작가가 읽어내고 뭔가 리서치로 조사하는 것, 그리고 작가가 그것을 어떻게 시각적으로 표현하는지, 실은 이것이 1대1의 등가 관계라고 할 수도 없겠고요. 어떻게 보면 뭔가 묘사적인 관계라고 할 수도 없겠고, 이것은 일종의 추상화의 과정인 동시에 구상화의 과정이기도 합니다. 그래서 제가 작가와 대화를 하면서 작가가 이제 learning, 배우는 것, unlearning, 이제 배웠던 것을 내려놓는 것, 심지어 non-learning, 배우지 않는 것에 대해서 이야기하는 것이 정말 멋지다고 생각했는데요. 실은 이 사전을 통해서 그것들을 좀 더 잘 이해하고자 했고, 작가가 지금 어떤 생각을 하고 있는지, 때로는 뭔가 작업 안에서 직접적으로 참조하기까지 하는 그런 것들을 좀 이해하고 설명하고자 했습니다. 과연 이제 이 안에서, 이 연금술 안에서 어떤 일이 일어나는지, 그리고 그것이 어떻게 작품이라는 물리적인 세계의 실체로 드러나게 되는지, 물론 여기에 대해서는 여전히 답을 얻지는 못했습니다만 사전이라는 형식을 통해서 한 곳에 그것을 모으고, 그리고 그러한 것들이 이제 가지고 있는 관계들, 말하자면은 머릿속에서 일어나는 어떤 지적인 것들과 물리적이고 시각적으로 드러나는 어떤 것들이 어떤 관계를 맺고 있는지를 이해하고자 했습니다. 그리고 뭐 여러 번 3차례 사전을 만들었지만 여전히 완벽하게 이해하지는 못한 것 같고, 이것을 통해서 좀 더 잘 이해하고자 하는 생각을 계속하고 있습니다.
네.
I think I would like to come back, excuse me, to come back once more to the lexicon and categories, because it's sort of like, it is a subtitle, but it's still, because I think it shows us how aware, of course, Haegyu, and it's a pity that she's not joining now our conversation, because that shows how aware she is about these, you could say, dichotomy between the visual and language, and if you go really back to the meaning of the word categories, which is then I looked it just up, class or division of people or things regarded as having particular shared characteristics, that sort of like could be one definition of categories. And if you think about this as maybe that could be also the surface, or that could be that what you see, the shared things or people have in common. And if you then go back to lexicon and to the definition, which comes from the word to speak, and the book, which is central to the written word. And I think this is already in this, on the one hand, you could say very easy, I mean, not easy, but very fundamental, very basal definitions, lexicon and categories, Hegel opens up such a vast, meaningful and central to our understanding of art, but in general of the world. And I think that's also the beauty of, or the strength of Hegel's approach, that she sometimes with words or with images which seems easy and very basal, creates a cosmos which opens up for so many questions and so many discourses.
네, 그래서 이제 좀 전에 약간 언급하긴 했지만, 그리고 사실은 이 행사의 부제이긴 하지만 용어와 범주라는 것에 대해서 조금 얘기를 해보고 싶은데요. 실은 양혜규 작가가 오늘 대화에 직접 참여하고 있지는 않지만 이런 용어와 범주라는 용어와 범주라는 제목이 사실은 이 양혜규 작가가 시각적인 것 그리고 언어의 관계를 얼마나 잘 인지하고 있는지를 보여주는 것이라고 생각합니다. 이를테면 뭐 범주라는 단어의 사전적인 의미를 제가 지금 찾아보니 이 범주라는 것은 특정한 성격을 공유하는 사람 혹은 사물이라고 정의가 됩니다. 이것을 어떻게 보면 이제 작품을 보는 사람들이 동시에 이제 바라보는 것 혹은 동시에 이제 공유하는 어떤 표면이라고 볼 수도 있겠고요. 그리고 이제 범주라는 단어도 마찬가지인데요. 이렇게 이런 근본적인 정의들을 떠나서 양혜규 작가가 본인의 작업을 통해서 더 폭넓은 의미를 끌어내고 그리고 예술을 이해하는 방식 그리고 사람들이 세계를 이해하는 방식을 확장한다고 생각합니다. 그런 점에서 양혜규 작가의 작업이 가지고 있는 어떤 미적인 측면, 아름다움 혹은 이제 힘이라고 하는 것은 일견 쉬워 보이거나 좀 이상해 보이는 어떤 것들을 통해서 너무나도 넓고 풍부한 의미를 끌어낸다는 것이죠.
잠깐 저 영어를 먼저 좀 해야겠습니다. Actually, Hegyu is watching this on YouTube, and she has lots of questions. But let me just address one of it, which I think would resonate with what you just commented on. I read, I quote, "The map of the art world has changed through globalization, that we have regions and issues." And Hegyu keeps also keep asking questions whether, or she actually received questions from people that whether she represents such new audiences and issues in the art world, such as region, generation, gender, etc. But in fact, she refuses to answer those questions. But rather, she tried to sophisticate but I would say at the same time, yeah, like she invites us to an extremely challenging and difficult arena due to the complexity she creates through the work.
네, 제 양혜규 작가가 직접 연락을 주셨는데요. 제 일마즈 선생님이 말씀 주신 것과 연관이 되는 것 같고요. 작가분이 질문을 받은 내용인데요. 실은 이제 예술계의 어떤 지형이라는 것이 세계화 이런 것들로 크게 변화를 하고 있습니다. 그리고 이러한 변화하는 지형 안에서 과연 양혜규 작가가 어떤 특정한 관객, 뭐 젠더 혹은 지역 같은 것을 이제 대변 혹은 대표하는지라는 질문이 있는데 실은 작가분은 의도적으로 그러한 것에 답을 거부하고 오히려 이제 더 복잡한 관계 속으로 저희를 끌어들이는 것 같습니다. Yeah.
이 부분에 대해서. So do you think? Could you comment on that?
이런 부분에 코멘트 주실 수 있을지 궁금합니다.
I mean, yes, I agree. I mean, I don't think it will be just Hegyu, but any serious artists who are getting attention and who are being asked these questions. I'm sure they share the impulse of not wanting to, and even not just impulse, actually the principle of not answering these kinds of questions directly, because these are classifying questions. And if you're, the reason why you're practicing, the reason why you're an artist at all is to be not classified and I think most artists do not want to be classified, then why answer such a restricting questions in simple ways?
양혜규 작가가 말씀 주신 부분에 대해서 절대적으로 동의한다고 말씀을 드리고 싶은데요. 사실 이것은 양혜규 작가뿐만이 아니라 어떤 진지한 작업을 하면서 주목받는 작가라면 누구나 이제 아니라고 대답하고 싶어하는 혹은 아니라고 원칙적으로 대답해야 되는 질문이기도 합니다. 이러한 질문에 대해서 직접적인 답을 제공하지 않는 것이요. 왜냐하면 작가들이 범주화되고 싶지 않다는 생각으로 작업을 하는데 이러한 질문이야말로 그러한 작가들을 범주화시키고 제약을 가하는 질문이기 때문입니다.
I think it's also interesting if you look at the work of Haegyu Yang, and also if you look at her career of her exhibition practice, and if you think then about region, generation, gender, and I would add class to these categories, and if you I would say Haegyu, like for example, also like Yan Vo or other artists of her generation, their approach in the work, the topics, how they deal with, let's say, cultural identity or with cultural signifiers, it's so complex, and it's also could, you know, approach from this different region, cultural region. And I think that's also why, for example, Haegyu and also Yan and also other artists, they really exhibit and are received and are discussed of and written of, not only in Europe and North America, but that it's very international in the true sense. That in Asia, in let's say Africa, on different continents also, and in different cultural regions, that the work of Haegyu is read and is received, and that there is a possibility of this. In contrast, maybe to, let's say, somebody like Baselitz, or you name it, like a typical Western position, which, let's say, only refers to the Western idea, let's say, of Greek or Roman tradition. And I think that's also a quality and a special characteristic of the approach of Haegyu, that she has the richness and the complexity of addressing and being relevant for really different regions, for different cultural, and I would also say for different classes. She can be read maybe in different ways, but she's approachable.
또한 흥미로운 점으로 말씀드리고 싶은 것이 이제 양혜규 작가의 작업을 보면, 그리고 양혜규 작가가 전시가 어떤 식으로 이제 전개되어 왔는지를 보면, 이제 저는 사실 여기에 뭐 지역, 젠더 이런 것뿐만 아니라 계급적인 차원도 더해서 말씀을 드리고 싶은데요. 양혜규 작가 혹은 뭐 얀보 같은 동세대, 이제 같은 세대에 속한 작가들을 보면 그들이 어떻게 문화 정체성과 같은 것들을 다루는지, 문화적인 어떤 기호 같은 것들을 다루는지를 보면 상당히 복잡한 방식으로 다룹니다. 그리고 그것이 어떻게 보면 바로 양혜규 작가, 얀보와 같은 그런 작가들이 단순히 유럽이나 북미권에서뿐만이 아니라 그 외에 정말 진정으로 국제적인 차원에서 전시되고 또 토론이 되는, 아시아랄지 아프리카 같은 서로 다른 물리적인 대륙, 서로 다른 문화 지역에서도 토론이 되는 이유라고 할 수 있겠고요. 그리고 양혜규 작가 작업의 어떤 그것이 독해되고 수용되는 가능성을 생각해보면 조르주 바셀리츠 같은 우리가 흔히 생각하는 그런 그리스, 로마 이런 것들 개념을 끌어오는 서구적인 작가들과는 매우 다릅니다. 그것이 바로 양혜규 작가가 지니고 있는 어떤 특징이라 할 수 있겠고요. 이제 작업의 풍부성, 그리고 그것이 읽혀질 수 있는 복잡성, 그리고 그것이 서로 다른 지역, 문화, 심지어 계급을 가진 사람들도 각자 읽어낼 수 있는 가능성을 지닌 점이 특징이라고 하겠습니다.
네, 되게 흥미로운 게 지금 그 여기 코멘트에도 그런 뭐랄까 어떤 지역적 정체성에 대한 이야기를 여쭤보시는 분이 계셨는데요. 이제 한국에서 이 전시를 하는 것에 대한 의미라든지 이번 전시로 한국성이 조금 나왔다고 보시는지 이제 이런 질문이 있었어요. 근데 일마준 선생님이 얘기하신 것처럼 어떤 그런 것에 정박되어 있다기보다는 그것을 더 복잡하게 하고 그 정체성에서 조금 달아나면서 이 미술이라는 행위가 훨씬 더 흥미로워지는 부분이 분명히 있다라고 생각을 하고요. 또 또 다른 질문 중에 하나는 그 세 번째 사전에 O2 H2O 전시가 업데이트된 부분이 있냐라고 말씀을 주셨는데 이거는 제가 답변을 드릴 수 있을 것 같고요. 그 마지막 사전이 이제 정도원 선생님 말씀하신 것처럼 저희 전시를 위해서 커미션이 됐고 또 그 O2 H2O 전시에 대한 내용이 짤막하게 그 크로노 노트에 담겼습니다.
Yeah. So actually, it's very interesting that on top of what Ilmaz has mentioned in our YouTube comment, there were some questions about the regional identity. What's the meaning of having this exhibition in Korea, and was there more Koreanness added to this exhibition? But as you said, as Ilmaz says, Haegyu tries not to be fixed in these notions, and she tries to make it more complex even, and she tries to run away from these fixations, which is very interesting. And there was another question about the third dictionary, what's updated in this third edition of the dictionary, which has been commissioned for the exhibition. There is an additional note about this exhibition in this new edition of the dictionary, in the Chrono Note.
네. 그리고 지금 양일 작가님이 또 질문 주셨는데 제가 하고자 했던 질문하고도 일맥상통하는 부분이 있는데요. 2018년에 이제 루드빅에서 Mid Career Survey Show를 했고, 그다음에 2020년에 이번 전시와 함께 나온 이제 세 번째 사전 모두가 어떻게 보면 이제 그 팽창하는 글로벌리즘의 정점에서 그 글로벌리즘의 수혜를 받은 세대의 표본으로서 거의 이제 양혜교 작가님의 만개한 그 정점의 모습을 담았다고 할 수 있는데, 뭐 작가님 이거를 relics of globalization이라고 얘기를 하시는데, 어쨌든 그 어떻게 보면 이건 질문을 위한 질문이라고 할 수 있는데요. 이전과는 다르게 움직임이 제한을 받은 오늘날 전시라는 매체 혹은 이제 더욱이 미술관이라는 공간의 공신력을 스스로 질문하게 하는 시대에 작가와 큐레이터 그리고 작가와 기관 간의 관계 측면에서는 우리가 어떤 질문을 해야 한다고 보시는지. 네.
So this is a question from Haegyu actually, that in 2018 she had a mid-career exhibition at the Ludwig Museum in Germany, and in 2020 she is having the third edition of the dictionary, which seems to be an ever-expanding practice, which can be considered as the full bloom of the generation who has been benefited from the globalization. Maybe even Haegyu says that it's a relics of globalization. But I think at the same time, the question is that now, never than before, there is a great restriction in the movement of everything. So we have to ask a question about this medium of exhibition with regards to the relationship between artist and curator and artist and the art institutions, because now we are even asking the credibility of the art institutions such as museums. So we wonder what's your opinion on this topic?
Whether public influence,
yes,
rather than the credibility.
Oh gosh, it's a really good question, and we could really talk about this in many different ways. I mean, I would just start saying something I think, yes, in many ways we are perhaps a very lucky generation. And I've been talking to different friends and colleagues about maybe we're the ones we're part of the generation that didn't actually experience war. We remember the Cold War, but we were a bit too young. We're about to go into a new Cold War, very possibly. And the walls really going up along political lines around the world. So the young generation that is coming up may be living in another period of a Cold War. So in many ways, perhaps we lived a very kind of carefree period of globalization, which isn't a perfect term. So artists, but curators, museum professionals, all of us who have been lucky to be part of this. You know, I think we benefited from the great mobility, but I guess one could say that we're also collusive with the damages that it has brought in as well.
네, 사실 너무 좋은 질문이라고 생각을 하고요. 여러 가지 다른 방식으로 이것에 대해서 논의가 가능하겠지만 이야기를 일단 시작해 보고자 합니다. 여러 면에서 사실 저희가 정말 운 좋은 세대라고 생각합니다. 여러 동료, 친구들과 얘기를 해보면 저희는 전쟁 경험도 없고 이제 냉전에 대한 기억은 있지만 이제 그 당시에 너무 어렸던 사람들이고 그렇기 때문에 어떻게 보면 지금 새로운 냉전이 일어날 수도 있고 어쩌면 이제 세계 각곳에서 장벽이 세워지고 있기 때문에 지금의 젊은 세대들은 실제로 그런 것들을 경험을 하게 될지 모르겠습니다. 하지만 저희 같은 경우는 어떤 면에서는 정말 세계화의 수혜를 받은 편안한 세대라고 할 수 있고 그런 저희 세대에 속한 작가, 큐레이터, 뭐 미술관, 박물관 전문가들이 운 좋게도 이것의 일부였습니다. 뭐 이동성이랄지 혹은 세계화로 인한 어떤 편리함이랄지 하지만 동시에 그런 세계화로 인한 폐해 또한 이제 경험한 세대라고도 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다.
As much as I share Dorian's, and maybe I'm a bit older, but as much as I share Dorian's, you know, interpretation of sort of like a more carefree generation or a generation, living in this non-Cold War area. At the same time, we all also experience a lot of anxiety right now, and also actually also I would say the last years, even 10 years, I would say, and a lot of conflicts. And I think it's interesting, you know, how Hegyu positioned herself and her work sort of like in this more global more global world. And one thing which I think is interesting to talk about maybe in this relation is also her way, how her work is very invites us to participate. On the one hand, she invites us with the stories, and they were mentioned already, let's say Petra Kelly, or the Korean freedom fighter Kim Sun, or like different characters. So she invites us intellectually, but at the same time, some of her works are physically even you participate, and with involving your body by touching, by moving, by creating sound. And also when she invites musicians into her installation to react to this, I think she takes the viewer very serious, or she allows, or she invites to participate on different levels. And I would say also this is a way to positioning herself in this, let's say, also global questions, or I would call the global conflict in a way, you know, to say, yeah, we can be active, and we can position ourselves by, as an artist, to ask certain questions without answering it, and also to take the audience seriously and invite them to react on different levels to the work.
사실 저는 정도령 큐레이터보다는 조금 더 연배가 있기 때문에 그런 뭐 자유로운 세대, 편안한 세대, 냉전을 겪지 않은 세대 이런 점에서는 다르게 생각을 하는 부분이 조금 있긴 하지만 어쨌든 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 지금 저희가 뭐 지난 몇 년 혹은 심지어 지난 10년간 정말로 많은 분쟁들을 보면서 참 많은 불안을 겪고 있습니다. 그리고 이러한 점에서 이제 양혜규 작가가 어떻게 본인을 좀 더 글로벌한 세계화된 세계 안에서 스스로를 위치 짓는지를 바라보는 것이 아주 흥미로운데요. 이를테면 작가의 이제 작업 방식은 우리를 그 안에 참여하게 만듭니다. 뭐 이를테면 페트라 켈리랄지 혹은 뭐 한국에서 저항 운동을 했던 김산이랄지 이런 사람들의 이야기 안에 지적으로 우리가 관여하도록 초대하기도 하고요. 다른 한편에서는 좀 더 물리적으로 이제 작업을 직접 움직이게 하거나 어떤 소리를 내게 하는 식으로 참여하게 만들기도 합니다. 또한 작업에 이제 음악가들을 초대해서 같이 작업을 진행을 한 것들을 통해서요. 이것을 통해서 저희가 알 수 있는 것은 작가가 관객을 매우 진지하게 생각하고 있고 관객들이 정말 많은 서로 다른 층위에 관여하도록 만든다는 것입니다. 이것에서 저희가 볼 수 있는 것이 양혜규 작가가 작가로서 이런 전 지구적인 질문에 응하는 방식, 그리고 우리가 반드시 어떤 정해진 답을 제공해야 하는 것은 아니지만 작가로서 어떠한 질문을 제기하고 사람들이 그것에 관여할 수 있도록 하는 것을 바라볼 수 있는 것입니다.
그 제너레이션에 대한 이야기가 나왔으니까 제가 지금 뭐 하나 마지막으로 질문을 드리자면은 이 대담의 관객으로 이제 기대하는 분들 중에 특히 이제 젊은 층의 미술계 종사자들, 기획자나 작가분들이 있을 것 같은데요. 그런 면에서 한 작가의 성장을 살펴본다는 게 이제 두 분께서 하신 그런 일들을 바라봤을 때 상당하게 흥미로운 케이스 스터디가 될 수 있을 거라고 생각이 들고요. 또 저 같은 경우에는 이번 전시를 3년간 이끌고 가면서 참 감사하게 생각했던 부분이 작가가 어떤 작품을 만들어가는 과정에 큐레이터의 어떤 적극적인 동참하는 역할을 기대한다는 건데요. 이거는 이제 저희가 도련쌤하고 사전 토크할 때 나눈 말이기도 했는데 양혜규 작가는 큐레이터를 단순한 facilitator, 그러니까 시설 제공자 정도로 절대로 여기지 않는다는 점입니다. 그러니까 작가가 작품의 제목을 만들거나 심지어 작품의 어떤 서사를 구성하는 순간에도 기획자의 인풋을 요구한다는 거죠. 그래서 저로서는 정말 많이 배웠고 또 제 자신의 태도를 스스로 다잡게 했던 그런 관계였다고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 이런 열린 작업 방식이 작가가 어느 정도 중견 작가로서의 궤도에 오른 후에 이를테면 후학양성이랄까요? 어떤 그런 면모가 드러나게 된 건지 아니면 이제 2000년대 중반 두 분은 처음 만났을 때도 이런 태도로 일관했었던 건지 좀 궁금합니다.
So maybe this should be our last question, which is about the issue of generation. That to talk about our expected audience for this conversation, it would be probably young curators and artists mostly. So I think it's a very interesting case study that you two have been through the artistic development of this artist. And for example, in my case, very thankfully for the 3 years of the preparing of this exhibition, I was very thankful that Haegyu Yang as an artist, she was expecting me to have a more active role. I mean, this has been mentioned in our preliminary discussion with Dorian, that Haegyu Yang as an artist, she does not only expect curators to be the facilitators. She expects more active involvement in the naming of the works and even the construction of the narrative for the exhibition. For example, she asked for more input from the curator. So I've learned a lot first, and I've also had a chance to review my attitude towards this practice. But what I wonder is that this open way of working with colleagues and curators, was it evident since she was in the early part of her career, or has this attitude of fostering the next generation been created or developed as she developed her artistic career as a mid-career artist?
Maybe Ilma should go first because he's known her longer, even longer than I have.
No, I think it's interesting, and I have to smile a little bit actually, because I agree. I can follow absolutely this characteristic that Haegyu expect a lot commitment and also a lot involvement, which I think is also very generous on the one hand to people she works with. But it's also so, I think, so beautiful, and that's why I have to smile. You know, she sends emails, text message to all of us also now, right? And, you know, getting involved, and that is the same Haegyu. I mean, Haegyu is super generous and wants to involve, but at the same time, Haegyu is very controlling and very, you know, yeah, but I think that's something positive. I think it's very good that she wants to have control. Because I mean, it's fun, but it's also very serious, and she's aware of this, that there is also a lot to lose, and that's why I think the engagement she expects from us, she expects at least even not even more engagement from her side. She really her approach is that she wants to have it perfect with also the intention that there is failure, and failure may be productive, but this duality of control and letting things get loose, I think that's a quality, and very there's a potential which makes her work so fruitful.
제 일만 선생님이 먼저 대답을 해주셨으면 좋겠는데요. 사실 이제 이런 이지혜 큐레이터 말씀을 들으면서 약간 미소를 짓기도 했습니다. 왜냐하면 이제 이러한 성격, 말하자면 어떤 큐레이터들, 같이 일하는 사람들에게 많은 기대를 하는 것이 어떤 면에선 동시에 아주 관대한 모습을 보여주기도 하는데요. 실은 지금 이 순간에도 양혜교 작가는 뭐 저희들에게 이메일과 문자 메시지를 보내고 있는데 이것은 지금만 그런 것이 아니라 예전에도 똑같은 양혜교 작가였습니다. 아주 많은 것들을 통제하거나 심지어 제어하려고 하는 것인데요. 이것이 어떤 부정적인 의미가 아니라 긍정적인 의미에서 말씀을 드리는 것입니다. 이제 제어하길 원한다는 것은 한편으로 매우 흥미롭고 재미있게 진행하면서도 다른 한편으로 매우 작업에 진지하게 임하는 것이고요. 본인이 작업에 이렇게 열성을 다하는 만큼 같이 일하는 사람들에게도 그만큼 관여하기를 바라는 것이죠. 그런 면에서 완벽한 결과를 원하면서도 어떤 면에서는 뭔가 일들이 이제 알아서 풀리도록 하는 이제 제어를 하면서도 좀 풀어놓는 그런 것이 양혜교 작가의 어떤 성격 혹은 특징이라고도 할 수 있겠습니다.
So the words that that Ilma has mentioned that I completely agree with are engagement and participation. Not just what Haegyu Yang's work does vis-a-vis the audiences, but vis-a-vis curators. So one thing, I mean, Haegyu and I are more or less the same generation. I guess what I really learned from her early on is that we have to be, yes, generous, but the form of generosity is by demanding. You know, that you demand each other to participate and engage in a joint project. Ilma's used the word control, and I think that's probably how he means it is probably similar as how I use the word demand. Yeah, maybe translate that first while I'm thinking about the second part.
일마즈 선생님께서 말씀해주신 부분에 크게 동의를 하는데 특히 이제 관여 혹은 참여라고 말씀해주신 것에 정말로 전적으로 동의를 하는 바입니다. 이제 단지 양혜교 작가의 작업이 관객들에게 이런 이제 관여나 참여를 요구하는 것뿐만 아니라 같이 일하는 기획자, 큐레이터들에게도 그것을 요구하는 것인데요. 실은 저는 양혜교 작가와 이제 연령으로 따지면 같은 세대에 속하지만 전부터 이제 그 작가에게 배웠다고 할 수 있는 부분은 우리는 매우 관대해야 하지만 이 관대함의 형식, 이제 관대함의 모양이라는 것은 어떤 것을 요구하는 것을 통해서 말하자면 참여나 관여를 요청하는 것을 통해서 이루어져야 된다는 것입니다. 그리고 제가 생각하기에는 이것이 이제 일마즈 선생님께서 통제, 제어라는 단어를 쓰는 것을 통해서 말씀하고자 하셨던 것과 같은 의미가 아닐까라는 생각입니다.
So, you know, one example would be that when I was writing the first dictionary, that I knew certain historical figures that I wrote about in the first dictionary already quite well. Like about Duras, I do quite well, for instance. But I didn't know much about Kim San and Nim Wales. I certainly didn't know, because I know nothing about German politics, about Petra Kelly and Gert Bastian, for instance. So, but Haegyu demanded that these are important historical figures and that I should know about, not just because that she as an artist is just studying and researching, but because these are figures of commitment and passion, but also many contradictions. So she didn't treat any of these people as a very simple cultural symbols or symbols of ideology, but these are all deeply human figures as well. So when she was in her own gentle but insistent way that I should really study them, I knew that what she was asking is that so that you can understand not so that you can understand my work better, but as because so that you can be a colleague and a comrade in, you know, keeping their spirits alive, if you will.
그래서 이제 예를 들면 제가 첫 번째 양혜교 작가에 대한 사전을 작성했을 때 뭐 이를테면 뭐 마르그리트 듀라스 같은 이제 실존했던 인물에 대해서는 잘 알고 있었지만 뭐 김산이랄지 혹은 뭐 독일 정치사에 등장한 어떤 뭐 사람들, 뭐 페트라 켈리 이런 사람들에 대해서는 잘 몰랐습니다. 하지만 이제 양혜교 작가가 저에게 요구한 것, 디맨드한 것이 이러한 중요한 역사적인 인물들을 알아야 된다. 그것이 단지 양혜교라는 작가가 그들을 연구하고 있기 때문이 아니라 그들은 정말로 열정과 헌신을 가진 동시에 이제 논란의 대상이기도 한 인물들이기 때문이고 단지 그들이 어떤 문화적 상징이나 이데올로기의 상징이 아니라 어떤 인간적인 하나의 인물로서 그렇기 때문에 당신이 그것을 알아야 된다고 요구했고 양혜교 작가의 특유의 어떤 부드러우면서도 강경한 방식으로 제가 그들을 정말 학습해야 된다, 공부해야 된다고 얘기를 했습니다. 그것이 이제 작가의 작업을 더 잘 이해하기 위해서만이 아니라 어떤 동료가 되기 위해서, 동지가 되기 위해서, 그리고 이 인물들의 어떤 정신을 여전히 이제 살아있게 하기 위해서 말입니다.
So just to finish off that point, if you don't mind, then yeah, here are 3 curators who have now worked with her for a stretch of time. I know that she has a simultaneous exhibitions going on, right? Like there's in Seoul and Manila and Toronto and now St. Ives. So if you just look at this superficially, it might seem like, of course, Hae Yang is a global artist or artist created by globalization, created by or supported by this network of curators and institutions who are enabling the expansion of her career. But what I'm trying to say is that it's a much more interdependent and even porous relationships, that because she also demands and invites and asks engagement and participations from curators, but also institutions of different contexts. So it's a practice of solidarity. It's a practice of comradeship and companionship, which I think will rise beyond that period, that carefree period, perhaps, of globalization. If indeed that period of globalization is over, and we're not going to be able to travel and work with each other so easily, then that network of trust and mutual demands will be even more important, in fact.
그래서 말씀드렸던 바를 좀 마무리해보자면 이 자리에 지금 양혜교 작가와 긴 시간에 걸쳐서 뭐 작업을 진행을 했던 3명의 큐레이터가 모여 있는데요. 표면적으로 봤을 때 양혜교 작가는 뭐 서울, 뭐 마닐라, 토론토 이런 도시들에서 동시에 여러 가지의 전시를 진행을 하고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 이것을 그 표면상으로만 보면 양혜교 작가가 마치 어떤 글로벌라이제이션, 그러니까 양혜교 작가는 진정으로 세계화된 작가이고 그런 세계화의 산물이고 그리고 이런 작업과 전시의 확장을 가능케 하는 이런 세계화된 큐레이터와 미술기관들의 네트워크의 산물이라고 생각할 수도 있겠지만요. 사실 제가 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 이 표면적으로 보이는 것이 사실은 보다 더 상호 의존적이고 보다 더 어떤 느슨하게 연결된 부분들이라는 것입니다. 말하자면 양혜교 작가가 다양한 맥락을 지니고 있는 큐레이터뿐만 아니라 심지어 기관들에게도 자신의 작업에 직접적으로 관여하고 참여하기를 요구하기 때문입니다. 그렇기 때문에 이러한 작업 전반은 실은 일종의 연대의 실천이고요. 어떻게 보면 동지애의 실천입니다. 말씀드렸던 것처럼 우리가 이제 편안하게 누렸던 그런 세계화의 시대가 끝났다면 그리고 지금 이제 더 이상 자유롭게 이동할 수 없는 상황이라고 하면 이러한 이제 신뢰와 상호적인 디맨드, 요구로 인한 네트워크는 더욱더 앞으로 중요해질 것이라고 생각합니다.
제
I
생각에
think these are very nice words for an end of our conversation, maybe, if I may say. No, seriously, I think that is such a nice, you know, put it together. But sorry, yeah.
definitely. I think he can just translate
네,
that.
그러니까 이렇게 종합적으로 정리해서 너무 멋지게 말씀해 주신 것 같다는 생각이 듭니다. 토크의 말미에 있어서.
네, 완벽한 마무리 코멘트셨습니다.
It was a perfect final sentence to the conversation.
네, 긴 시간 함께 해주신 여러분 참 감사드리고요. 일단 제가 좀 홍보를 몇 개 하겠습니다. 이 대담 시리즈는 이제 또 주한 독일문화원과 공동으로 이제 진행이 되고 있는데 그 두 번째 행사가 있어요. 아까 이제 괄호로 얘기를 드렸는데 이제 두 번째 행사는 일종의 패널 행사처럼 전시를 마치기 전인 내년 2월 말에 사회학자 김홍준 교수님하고 싱가포르 CCA 관장님이시기도 한 우테메타 바워 교수님 모시고 대담을 나눌 예정이니까요. 많은 관심 부탁드리고요.
So thanks everyone for being with us for such a long time today. And I have to make an announcement and advertisement, which is that this event is supported by the Goethe Institute Korea. And also, as I said at the beginning of the event, that this is constructed as a kind of a parenthesis to the exhibition. So there will be a second exhibition as kind of like a closing event at the end of February, in which we will have Kim Hong-jung, a sociologist, and Utemeta Bauer, who is also a director of the CCA in Singapore.
또 이번 전시를 준비하면서 여러 워크숍을 통해서 준비한 음악 퍼포먼스가 마련됐는데요. 전시가 개최되는 동안 매달 마지막 수요일 장소를 그 전시장 안에서 장소를 바꿔가면서 뮤지션들이 공연이 열릴 예정입니다. 그 첫 번째 공연이 다음 주 수요일 10월 28일 오후 6시 반에 서울박스 침묵의 저장고 클릭된 속신 작품 안에서 이루어집니다. 한국 전통 악기인 대금과 바이올린 그리고 퍼커션이 연주하는 흥미로운 곡들을 준비했으니까 많은 관심 부탁드리겠습니다.
Yes, and also we have developed this exhibition through a series of workshops with musicians. So there will be a musical events in the every last Wednesday of every month. So
Recital.
Recital, let's say. So the upcoming one is on October 28th, 6:30 p.m. at the very work, which is Silo of Silence, click core in the MMCA. So please be there.
Yeah,
for the event.
Next Wednesday. Hopefully we can stream it for you guys. We'll keep you posted. 네, 여러분 정말 감사드립니다. 그럼 이것으로 행사를 마치도록 하겠습니다.
Again, thanks everyone for being with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Bye bye.